Shortly, we're going to be releasing a new version of DataHub, version 7.3.5, and it includes a new capability for handling shortcut keys. And in this video blog, I'm going to show you how we can handle shortcut keys. So I've got a new page on here, and the first thing I'll get you to notice is that down here in the script section of the page level properties, we have a few new properties here. One is called the shortcut key filter pattern, which is kind of like a global setting for the page and controls on this page to determine whether or not a key passes a particular filter and whether or not it would be a candidate as a shortcut. We also have a shortcut key pattern, which is the pattern for this particular event, and we have control level mechanisms as well. So the first thing that I'm going to do then is, just for illustration, I'm going to add a couple radio buttons. Let me just change the zoom of my screen here. So here is a radio button, and I'm going to set this up so that it's actually a collection of 3 different radio buttons. The first one will have a value of 1, and again it's going to be in the group called radio 1 because I want 3 different controls here, and each of these are going to be in essence mutually exclusive from the others, but they all need to be in the same radio group. So the value that this one corresponds to is going to be number 2, and this will be a value of 3, like that, and again in the same radio group. And let me just group these things together. And while it really doesn't have a bearing on this demonstration, I'll just do it very quickly here. I'm going to set the border up for this control to use a border, top left border of 2 pixels each, and a bottom right border of 2 pixels each, and I'll set that color for the bottom and the right portion to be silver, and I'm going to set a content margin to about 5, so that kind of gives me a bit of a 3-dimensional effect, and you can see that as I select these, they are in fact mutually exclusive. And so the point of this first control is that I really want it to be, selecting the buttons using a page level shortcut event handler. Okay, so that really is the point that I'm trying to use with this control here. And I guess I can just format that a little bit differently. So let's just use that, and font will be, and italicize, that'll be okay. Okay, and so the next thing I want to do is actually work with a data point binding for each of these 3 things. And so when I select my first radio button, I want to actually set a point binding on this guy to be the selected radio button, and you'll notice that it doesn't recognize this data point, and that's because even though that this is a local data point, it still needs to be defined before we can actually use this. So I'm going to go to the page level script here on page load started, and I'm going to just define a selected radio data point. I'll just initialize it arbitrarily to a value of 2, and I'm going to run that script now. Executing this script now means I don't need to just reopen the page. I can actually just test it. So as soon as I've done that, you'll notice this message here should disappear. But first thing I'll do is actually show you under dynamic globals that down here at the bottom, it has now defined a local data point. And you can tell it's local because there's no colon in front of that. So it's not a DataHub data point. It's actually just a local data point, or if you will, a dynamic global variable, and you can see it has a value of 2. So I'm now going to come back and set a point binding to selected radio, and you can see it's now in the list, and I'll do the same thing for each of these other controls. And there we go. And so you'll notice that now if I leave this little window on, there's my selected radio value, and you can see it's pointing at value 2. And as I select each of the different radio buttons, you can see it takes on the correct value. And similarly, if I set the value of this dynamic global, it will appropriately set the value of that control as well. So now that I've got this group of controls in here, what I'd really like to be able to do is to pick one of these controls based on a shortcut key. So I'm going to go back to my page properties here, and I'm going to add a little bit of script associated with my my page. And so specifically, what I'd like to do is create a switch statement. And the switch statement is going to take its value from the shortcut key event args, which is automatically made available inside the shortcut key pressed event handler. And so I can do something like case, if the user presses the number 1 key, then what I want to do is set the value of my selected radio button, for example, to a value of 1. Okay? And I'll just do that very simply, and there are obviously other ways that I could do this, but I'll just do that very simply. And for the sake of illustration, I'm actually going to put a default section in here as well, just to illustrate that other keystrokes actually make it in here. So you pressed event args dot shortcut key, and I'll put a title of there of page level handler and my break statement. Okay, so now that I've got that in there, you should notice that when I go into run mode, and actually let me just save my page here. So this is going to be my shortcut key demo. And when I go into run mode, you'll notice that now as I push the number 3, nothing happens. What did I do wrong? Let me just go back and check my script again here. Oh, sorry about that. Obviously that needs to be a 2 and that needs to be a 3. Sorry about that. So now when I go back into run mode and I do a 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, and so you can see I press the number 4 in there, and that is being picked up by my default handler, which of course was right there. So the values of 1, 2, and 3 are setting my global dynamic variable or my data point locally, and anything else is going to manifest as a message box here. So you can see that right now, if I press something Control Alt C, that's going to come through as part of the page event handler as well, whereas the number 4, same thing, but 1, 2, and 3 get handled directly, and I just pressed enter there, get handled directly. So a couple of things that we might want to consider is, well, we only want certain keystrokes making its way through this. So we can specify as part of our filter mechanism that, for example, we only want numeric keys. And this is a regular expression. Both of these are regular expressions. So in essence, this is a filter that says only allow certain characters to even be considered as shortcut keys for anything on this page. And so now you'll notice that when I press 3, 2, 1, it works. When I press 4, that also works. So any numeric key is going to work. But if I press the enter key, if I press Control Alt C, none of those make it through because they have been entirely filtered out by my global filter pattern here. Okay? So the next thing that I want to do is to duplicate this control. Oh, one other thing that I should point out is that if I add a text control here, for example, it becomes really important to make sure that the text box can take 1, 2, 3. And so you can see I can enter anything into that text box, but when I get out of that, so let me just illustrate, I'm going to add a checkbox and I will add a button to my screen. So you can see that as I have my focus on something other than the text box, so I'm going to click on my checkbox, then 1, 2, 3, those work correctly. But inside here, 1, 2, 3 goes directly into the text box, and that's the way that it should be handled. So the next thing I want to do is duplicate this set of controls here, and I want this guy to actually be handled as if it is a control level event handling mechanism. So rather than having to put page level event handling mechanism in here, I really want this one to be handled by the control itself. So I'm going to first of all do a little bit of legwork here. I'm going to change this to a 4 and 5 and 6. And just for the sake of illustration, you'll notice that I have to make sure that these work correctly. Now this is jumping all over the place because I'm setting the same value, but you'll notice that these can only be one of these 6 things. And it's important that I set each of these controls to actually behave as part of a different radio group. And that's what handles the mutual exclusivity of it. So I'm going to set these 3 bottom controls to work with radio group 2, and I actually want a different data point. So once again, I'm going to come into here and I'm going to add a second selected radio 2, and I'll arbitrarily set that to some value. And just for the sake of illustration, I'm turning on my script window. I'm going down to the bottom. I see selected radio 2. You'll notice there's nothing beneath that. When I execute this script, you can see now it has added selected radio 2 as a second data point. And so that should allow me to now go back up to this group of controls and specify the appropriate data binding here. So I'll do that one and that one and that one. And now when I go into run mode, and I guess I can leave this window on again, there's my selected radio 2 and 3. So I'm going to select the first one, and it changes the value to 1. And I select number 5, and there goes the second button in that group. And these are 2 different groups now that are mutually exclusive. I still have not added control level shortcut key handlers there, but let's do that now. So rather than specifying the shortcut key mechanism at the page level, I can do that through some of the common events here. And these are new common events. So I'm going to actually set this up so that the shortcut key pattern that is specifically interpreted for this control is the number 4. And when this event fires, what I want to do is actually set the isChecked property of this local control to true. Okay, and isChecked, of course, is just up in the basic properties section. It's that value there. So when the user presses the number 4 key, the isChecked property of this control, radio button 4, should go true. And similarly, we'll do that for each of these. So here is my shortcut key pattern, the number 5. Remember again that that is a regular expression. And number 6. It's number 6 with my regular expression. And so let's see if this is working. So when I press 6, oh, there we go. Okay, so this is still our page level event handler coming in. And so you'll recall that the page level event handler, I'll just hit OK on that for a second. I'll press the number 2. You'll see that that handles that 3. And if it's a 1, 2, or 3, that's our page level event handler. But when we type in the number 4, you'll recall that we had a default setting associated with our page level event handler. And so that 4 gets displayed as a message box at the page level, but it also selects the appropriate key. Well, clearly we do not want our page level event handler to now be handling our shortcut key pattern like we've got there. So I'm going to set this up so that the only keystroke that it actually handles is a 1, 2, or 3. And now let's just try that. So I'm going to press 1, 2, 3, 654. And so you can see everything is working correctly. The page level event handler didn't even try to interpret that one, and these were handled by the controls themselves. I'll just do another example here of another control. So let me, I'll just move this over a little bit. So I'll just add a light to my page, and I'm going to set a common event handler here for the light. I'm going to use a shortcut key pattern that corresponds to Control plus Alt plus any character. And again, this is a regular expression, and the plus sign is a special character with regular expression. So we need to escape that by using the backslash in front of it. And I'm just going to copy an event handler. So this piece of script you can see is simply taking or looking for a certain Control-Alt combination. If the user presses Control-Alt-C, it's going to display in a message box the color of the light. Control-Alt-F will display whether it is true-false flashing, and Control-Alt-O will indicate whether that light is on or off. So that should fire through with a Control-Alt combination. So let's see if that works. I'm over here. I'm going to press Control-Alt-C, and I can see it actually didn't make it all the way through to the light. The reason is, you'll recall that we have back here our shortcut key filter pattern. And again, this is being used for anything on the page. So in this case, we really do not want now a filter pattern. We want to allow any controls other than number keys through. So I'm going to go back over here, and you'll now notice when I press Control-Alt-C, there is, you know, the light for Shining Light 2, for example, and that's just the name of that light. Okay, so there is Shining Light 2, for example. Well, I should be able now to copy and paste that light a few times. And so I've got lights 2, 3, and 4. And if I change the color of these lights, so I'm going to just change this one to a powder blue, and I'll make it flashing. And the last light I'll just set to some arbitrary color of green, and it is not on and not flashing. You'll notice that now these events will actually fire in sequence. So when I press Control-Alt-C, there is the color for light 2, which is actually the first light. There is light 3, and there is light 4. And if I press Control-Alt-F, there is, you know, not flashing the first one, flashing the second one, not flashing the third one. So these events fire one after the other. The final thing that I'll do is, let's just put an event, a custom event on the click event for the submit button, and we'll just do a very simple example. So I want to say something like, you know, it's being submitted. Okay. And so obviously when I click on that submit button, I'm going to get, you know, some message. Well, what I want to do is put a shortcut key on that button as well, so that it will, in essence, execute the same script behind the shortcut key. So I am going to specifically indicate a shortcut key pattern for this button here as Control plus Alt plus S for submit. And when this event fires, I actually want to evaluate, or in essence call, the same script expression that is part of this control. So I'm going to say grab the click event code from there and just run it. And so now you'll notice that when I press Control-Alt-S, it executes the same logic associated with the click event for that submit button. So in this demonstration, you have seen how we can add shortcut key handlers both at the page level as well as at the individual control level, and how we can specify regular expression patterns to filter candidate shortcuts anywhere on the page, as well as how we can indicate what the actual keystroke is that correspond to the event handler script.